Okay. Well, I think we'll have some more people coming in, but it's a good time to start. So, greetings, everyone, and welcome to Color Literacy Forum number 15. I'm Luann Stovall, a member of the Color Literacy Project Core Team and host of the Color Literacy Forums. The forums offer a platform to share innovative research, teaching methods, and resources to expand 21st century color education at the university level across all disciplines, from design and the arts to humanities and the sciences. This project is a collaboration of the Color Literacy Project in partnership with the International Color Association, that's the AIC, Intersociety Color Council, ISCC, and Cumulus, the leading global association of art and design research. Before we jump in, please keep your cameras and microphones muted during the forum, and be sure to let us know who you are by putting your name, where you're joining us from, and your university or place of work in the chat box. An active chat box is highly encouraged in our forums, so please keep your fingers warmed up for comments and questions. We would like to hear from everyone because we are all in this color community together. Thank you. Also, please note that today's forum is being recorded and will be available within about 10 days. All of the past forum recordings are posted to our YouTube channel, which you can access directly on the Color Literacy website at colorliteracy.org, and that's color with an O-U-R. So this is the first forum in our 2026 series titled Color in Practice, Expanding Knowledge for a Changing World. As global challenges reshape how we design, communicate, and engage our environments, the subject of color itself must evolve to meet new social, ecological, and technological demands. This series highlights practitioners, researchers, and thinkers who propose innovative, meaningful, and ethical approaches to color, grounded in current knowledge rather than inherited conventions. Each forum in the 2026 series showcases real-world applications that position color as a strategic, sensorial, psychological, ecological, and systemic tool, demonstrating its impact across materials, spaces, and experiences. Understanding this broader landscape allows us to see color not simply as an aesthetic choice, but as a force with tangible effects. The series invites participants to question assumptions, explore emerging methodologies, and expand their understanding of color. In doing so, it redefines color literacy for today and for the future, framing this interdisciplinary field as a vital and dynamic form of knowledge, one that equips us to navigate a complex, interconnected, and rapidly changing world with insight, responsibility, and creativity. Today's forum number 15 is Designing with Color, Relation, Strategy, and Regeneration. It's part 1 in the 4-part series. Before I introduce our 3 speakers, let's review the timeline. Today's forum is 90 minutes long, and it's divided into 2 parts. Part 1 is an hour long. Each speaker will give an approximately 15-minute presentation. You are encouraged to type your comments and questions in the chat box during the presentations. But rather than take questions after each talk, we'll have a moderated panel discussion with the speakers in part 2 of the program, and that's from 12 noon to 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Your questions and comments will be addressed during this session. Now, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker. Talk 1 is Color as Relation, the End of Substance and the Beginning of Practice by Timo Rieke. Timo is Professor of Color and Surface Design at Hawk University of Applied Sciences and Arts in Hildesheim, Germany, where he co-directs the Institut International of Trend Scouting. He serves as chairman of the board of Deutsche Farbenzentrum e.V. and collaborates closely with RAL, a highly recognized European color management system, on color communication and trend strategy. His research centers on relational color theory, CMF practice, and you'll be hearing a lot about CMF, that's color, materials, and finish, and evidence-based color psychology, building his foundational work on color, touch, synesthesia. And there was a book that he came out called Haptic Visuals in 2008. Please welcome Timo Rieke. Timo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luann, for the introduction. And hello all, hello to the world now. Good evening from my side here in Hanover, where I'm situated right now. And good morning to the rest of the world. Thank you for inviting me to this occasion, and I'm honored and delighted to take part in this exciting forum that I follow closely. I thank the organizers, Luann, Ingrid, and all the others from the Color Literacy Project. I talk to you today as a color designer. I must say what's the topic we're talking today. We came upon the topic actually recently in a conversation with Lena Schmidt, where we were talking about the gap between color science and color application. And today's topic is a work in progress in this field. To give you some context, our campus at Hawk University in Hildesheim is situated in visual connection to two UNESCO World Heritage Sites, the Michaeliskirche, you can see this from the arrows, and the Hildesheimer Dome. The design faculty has about 800 students and has a history dating back to 1839. You can get a bachelor and master's degree in color design, and we have a full curriculum in color design, which is quite rare. At HAWK, we view color as a reflection of past actions, present circumstances, and relationships, as well as a sign of a conceivable future. It is intrinsically linked to human behavior, emotions, and feelings and expectations. And as such, as designer, our approach is to reflect on the interaction between external event and internal states when we design. In our artificial sky, for example, we can test lighting and color schemes, and in the spatial lab, we evaluate color concepts. Color design at university often evolves around materiality and is consistently developed, implemented, and strategically planned. The contexts include living, health and care, hospitality, public interest, automotive, and body-related contexts. Maybe the topic of CMF is mostly known from the automotive contexts, where you design the car interior, etc. Okay, let's start with today's topic. Much of the existing color theory suggests that there are effects of color that are measurable, reproducible, and detachable from context. This is the basic assumption of substantialism. Color has properties that can be isolated and measured under controlled conditions, stimulus and response, and there is some truth about it. But green is calming. Somewhere in a design brief, on a brand guideline, in a color psychology handbook, there is a sentence like this. We all know its logic. It meets us every day. And for those of us who work seriously with color, something doesn't quite sit right, I must say. A quite unease. This talk is about this unease and what it tells us. If studies on psychology of color only recognize the categories green, red, and yellow, then I'm completely overwhelmed. There is a huge difference between one shade of green and another. Green alone can be used to discuss the entire spectrum of measurable emotions, from calmness to excitement, and from restraint to dynamics. There is a paradox. This applies even to single specific shade. 6 completely different experiences. If color was a property, a stable, transferable substance, this should not happen. But it always happens. The unease has a reason. The measurable spectrum color values don't change here. It's the same place in Blåvand, which translates as blue water in Denmark. But somehow the green on the one side is cool and on the other side it's warm. We are also maybe familiar with the famous example of the dress. Color actually is relative. You can see this in this example too. Newton usually spelled blue as blue. Did he already know color is a verb? I don't think. But here we see a green that has a bluish tinge. And if we transfer it, of course, so the sentence is the same color we saw before. But now the same blue appears green. The shade we perceive not only depends on the color of the surroundings, but on far more factors than we find in the traditional guidebooks. By the way, if I mix up the words in this color psychology guide, published on a well-known website, you even get better results. So this should not happen in a substantialist environment where color has a reason. My suggestion then is that we leave substantialist color theory behind. Today I would like to talk about a new theory of color. Color as a verb. I call it relational color theory. It replaces the substantialist conception of color with one based on relation. It's a shift others already went. Since Maxwell's field theory in 1865, physics has no longer described matter as a substance, but as a structure of forces and interactions. Biology does not view the organism as a thing, but as a process in relation to its environment. Uexküll's concept of the environment as a constitutive relationship between living beings and their milieu dates back to 1909. And since Georg Simmel, 1908, sociology has no longer sought to define the nature of social groups, but rather the relationship that constitute them. Whenever science has looked more closely, it has dissolved substances into relations. Many color designers and theorists have also repeatedly conceived of and experienced color as a relationship, but have rarely put it into words in this way. Perhaps most clearly in the work of Joseph Albers with his interaction of colors, or the paper Color Harmony Revisited by the Australian scientist Zena O'Connor. Her formula for color harmony is brilliant and also has influenced this work we can see here. I'm very sorry I cannot go deep into it, but it's worth it. So look it up. Color is not a substance that acts upon us, but a relationship that arises between us. We act upon color just as color acts upon us. One cannot conceive without the other. It is not the color that acts upon us. We bring something with us, experience, body, context, and it is only in this convergence that what appears green becomes into being. Color can therefore never be completely separated from the experience and expectations we bring with us when we perceive it. How we perceive color depends on the relationship between light, object, body, context, and time. Without light, there is no color. Without an object, there is no color. Without a person, there is no color. Color is not a substance, but arises only in relation. In a relational color practice, there is no calming green and no hopeful yellow. There is an atmospheric constellation, a web of relations between light, material, use, body, cultural memory, that in a specific context gives rise to a specific color experience. It's not the color that acts, it is the relation that emits an atmosphere. Color is a possibility to create a relation. And I want to go further. What you see here is a still life from the art studio at the university. It was completed about 10 years ago. The equipment is white. That was also specified in the construction plans. But the elements do not fit together. What you see here is the chaos of white tones. Something went wrong here, and as a result, we see a scene that appears chaotic and unplanned. But what are we really seeing here? Do we see a wrong color? You're not seeing the wrong color. In this design, you're seeing the relationships that prevail during the planning stage. And you can see that the fittings of the washing basin were not a priority during construction. You see the randomness that occurs when people do not communicate with one another. when decisions are made purely on functionality and aesthetic appreciation and care are presumably sidelined for cost reasons. You are not seeing the wrong color here, the wrong shade of white. You are seeing the failed relationship between the client, the architect, the heating engineer, the plumber, the electrician, and the tiler. Color reveals relationships and arises from them. Nevertheless, we still teach basic color theory, 100-years-old color contrasts and color wheels at universities, as if this was sufficient to explain color experience in its application within a space or on a product. The final realization of the relational nature of color is still pending. Color is still understood as if it were a property of things, as if red, green, or blue had something that makes them red, green, and blue always and everywhere. And that's not the case. And we know better. It is particularly the focus on primary colors that makes the application of color psychology a real problem for us designers. Be warned, brightness and vibrancy have a far greater effect on experience of color than the hue itself. Primary colors are not as different as some people think. Our perception of hues can wonderfully altered by naming, material, spatial conceptions, and context. Color is not a property, it happens. We do not ask what is the right color as designers. We ask about relationships and what we want to achieve. And color is influenced by at least 8 factors that make it a significant element. Each is essential. The relative importance may vary depending on the project, but they always play a role and cannot be ignored when it comes to careful design. We know that even the omission of color constitutes a color concept. And color design and CMF, which is a specialty of color design, is about balancing these influential factors. So you can review the video maybe to get to all these factors, because there's no time today to get on to all of them. All this has a consequence. If color is a relation, then designing color means designing the conditions for human experience. That is not a neutral act. It involves choices about whose body is centered, whose history is acknowledged, whose comfort is prioritized. Color design that ignores this is not apolitical, it is unconsciously political. Relational color practice always asks the ethical question. And when we create color reports, we always create with relations in mind and always in a matrix that create relations. We show possibilities and contextual and analytical input that runs in the background. We try to explain what we do. That's also why we put our colors in context. And when a color of the year claims, with its expansive effect, the shade creates spaces where function and emotion intersect, we are already ready to buy into the story. We're not in agreement because we recognize the experience being described here. But the description says more about us than it does about the color. Because it's not the color that provides clarity. It works well in clear environments. It's not the shade that is spacious. It works well in spacious rooms. It's not the color that transforms living spaces into oases. It enhances what is already an oasis. This can be put in the test in no time. The same shade in the waiting area of a government office, in a hospital corridor, in a poorly lit, rented flat. The promised lightness fails to materialize. Not because the color fails, but because it never delivered what it was promised to deliver. This is not a flaw in the description, it is its principle. Substantialist color language works because it renders the conditions of its success invisible. Substantialist color language works because it renders the conditions of its success invisible. I want to end with a system, but with an image, a found object. The relational color countermodel is the findling, the design anchor you don't invent but find, a specificity of a place, a quality inherent in material. Laura will talk about that. A historical reminiscence that offers itself as a starting point for a color design. We hear Montaha soon. The finding is not arbitrary. It is context-bound, situated, and grounded. Color as relation, not a slogan, an invitation to take the actual subject seriously, the event between us and the world. Find the smallest arrangement that contains an event. Color works when everything works. When the right color appears in the right light, on the right material, in the right context, it is the color that succeeds. It is the constellation. Color is the most visible part of that constellation, which is why it gets the credit. But a color that works in one context fails in another, not because it changed, but because the relation changed. What we call the right color is always shorthand for a successful atmospheric whole. The problem of traditional color theory is the misconception of the relational color, a nature of color. My theory is not a way out of the dilemma, it resolves the dilemma. Color can be seen as a spectral value, a pigmented material, as a human perception, but it performs only in relation. So color is ignored in too many contexts because we told stories about color that could not deliver. And in AI times, AI is perfect at the substantialist task, pattern specification reproduction. And this is exactly why relational color competence has never been more urgent. Color is a relation that only humans can fully inhabit. And this becomes a core competence that let us create better relations for all. So let's see color as a relation, and let's see that we create relations that benefit us all. Thank you very much for attending and for letting me speak out today. Thank you.
Timo, thank you so much. One of the words that you just said, I'm so happy that you said what you said and started the conversation with this, but it's the word constellation. I'd love to see it in terms of a constellation. So I'm sure we're getting a lot of responses from our audience, and we're looking forward to the questions in the panel discussion that we're going to have at the end. So thank you very much. That brings up our next talk. That is going to be talk 2. The effects of urban color planning on mood and perception by Montaha Hidefi, who defines herself as a color archaeologist, uncovering the historical layers of color to shape tactical future directions. Founder of Color Landing Studio, Montaha brings a strategic and investigative approach to color forecasting and trend interpretation. With a career spanning 4 continents and industries from specialty chemicals to marketing, Montaha offers a culturally enriched perspective rooted in over 25 years of expertise. As an author and speaker, she shares her insights globally through publications, keynotes, podcasts, and leadership roles. Her work focuses on research-based strategies that connect color to consumer emotionality and market relevance. Montaha is currently president of the Color Marketing Group, that's CMG, where she also served as vice president of forecasting from 2020 to 2024, and led virtual color forecasting across 4 geographical regions during and post-pandemic. As an active member of the Color Research Society of Canada, she served as vice president from 2023 to 25. She also served as vice president of the Canadian Freelance Guild from 2021 to 24. Since 2023, Montaha has been a color consultant with the ChemQuest Group, a leading global firm specializing in consulting for specialty chemicals and materials. Please welcome Montaha Hidefi. Montaha, the floor is yours. Great. That's perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Luan, and I want also to thank Ingrid for this opportunity to speak about color archaeology. I'm also very happy to be sharing the screen today with Laura and Timo, experts in color and CMF design. I'd like to begin with a simple statement. The colors that we think are new are not necessarily all new. They are actually echoes of our cultural memories that reemerge when we are ready for them again. And today, I want to share what I believe color, material, and finish strategy needs something deeper than what we call trends. It needs what I call color archaeology. But first, I just want to say that these two photos that you can see on the screen provide some insights into what follows. So the photo on the left of your screen is of a Moroccan leather tannery from Fez. So leather tanneries in Morocco are among the oldest in the world, with very labor-intensive methods that go over 1,000 years ago. And these sites actually, or in these sites, they process rawhides that come from sheep, goat, cow, and even camels. And they produce and treat the colors of the leather in these stone vats all by hand by using natural substances like pigeon droppings, lime, and even plant-based dyes. And that is over 1,000 years ago now, and they still use the same technology if you want. To the right of the screen, the photo shows a collection of modern cosmetics. So I hope that you see the allegory here between the two photos. We all know that nowadays we are living in a moment of acceleration, and color cycles are really moving very fast, sometimes even faster than light. And so the digital platforms are really amplifying the aesthetics all the time. We all know that AI can generate thousands of palettes in seconds. But something to me feels unstable because when everything is new all the time, actually nothing feels anchored. We don't feel anchored. And when it comes to CMF, this situation becomes risky because materials have a longer life cycle and last longer than trends. And the surfaces that we use carry memories, and the products that we buy stay in our homes for years. So the question we need to ask ourselves is not what is next, but what prevails, what keeps coming back, and why. And that's where color archaeology comes in. So many of you may ask, what is color archaeology? Well, that's simple, to me at least. Color archaeology is a terminology that I came up with around 2020, and I define it as a disciplined excavation of color memory, its origins, evolution, reinterpretation, and recurrence across time. Color archaeology studies where a color came from. What it meant in its original context, how it disappeared, and why it's resurfacing. But this is not to be confused with nostalgia, because nostalgia is sentimental, but color archaeology is analytical. And it allows us to understand why a hue resurfaces in context X at time Y. So color archaeology allows us to stop and ask questions like what emotional need is being repeating, and what cultural condition is reactivating a dormant color or a dormant color palette. We humans, we know that we anchor our emotions in color memory, not only in the visual preferences. And when we understand this thread or this notion, color becomes strategy, not decoration. And to illustrate this notion, I will share with you two case studies or two research color palettes, if you want. And the first one relates to brown and earth tones in the 70s in relation to earthy vibrancy in our current times. So in the 70s, earth tones dominated with a lot of brown, a lot of rust, ochre, and even avocado. And full disclosure, I borrowed the color reference at the bottom of the screen from my colleague and CMG board member, Dori Horn. So thank you, Dori. So going back to the 70s, this earthy palette emerged during a time of environmental awakening, oil crisis, and also political uncertainty. So people moved away from the mid-century cool colors toward a grounded warmth. They chose material that felt honest, like wood, clay, veneer, leather, and also heavy textiles. So this palette was about connection to earth. It was optimistic in its own way. But eventually it became coded as dated, heavy, dark, old-fashioned. And then, poof, it disappeared for many decades until it came back. For the last few years, we have seen this color palette being resuscitated. Many interior design surveys are showing browns and earthy tones as defining colors of our times. And even at Color Marketing Group, we have seen this directionality continuing for many years now, and it's not stopping. And you may ask, but why? What is the reason behind this comeback? So the browns and earthy tones we are seeing in recent times have different meanings than those from the past. They aren't nostalgic, they are refined. They have a matte finish and are paired with minimal forms and tactile surfaces. In the 70s, brown and earthies expressed environmental optimism. In the now, they are expressing more of an emotional security. After years of cool gray minimalism, people are craving warmth, depth, and also authenticity. So the same hue family with different psychological drivers. And here's where CMF or color material and finish becomes critical. Because the colors didn't return alone. They also brought the materials with them. However, we noticed that the material language are also evolving. So the brown materials in the 70s were glossy with veneer, which felt a lot like synthetic and heavy. But today's brown is preferred in matte finishes with mineral textures and preferable made of sustainable composites. So in this context, we see how the materials are playing a big role in transforming the meaning and the narrative of the color. Another example from the 70s is the shiny plastics. While today we prefer clay and terracotta over plastics. Different times, different CMF translations and narratives. And so without understanding the historical layers, we are mostly improvising when it comes to color application. So we are not thinking strategically, we are copying what others are doing. And that's why color strategy must consider not only the color, but also the surface finish, the tactility, the reflectivity, and how they convene all together to meet the inclinations of the times. So beyond earth tones, the 70s also featured more romantic and pastel influences. So pastel pinks and other gentle contrasted hues appeared in interiors and in fashion and symbolized comfort and intimacy. Over time, they were also dismissed as too sweet or outdated. And with today's evolution, design is again embracing soft and romantic pastels. And the softness is seen now as expressive, implying a human touch, implying nostalgia, and also implying emotional reassurance. Again, similar colors, but the message has changed over time. So from comfort and intimacy in the 70s, the soft colors now signal a need to slow down. They signal also a human presence in our hyper-digitalized era. So these two directionalities of color palettes illustrate how colors that once were coded as dated have been recontextualized in a way that aligns with our contemporary emotional and experiential drivers. So what are the strategic implications of all this? And how is color archaeology applied? So color archaeology is ingrained in research as analysis. When we apply color archaeology, there are three elements that guide us. The first is memory, which represents what the color once represented. The second is material, which relates to how the color is expressed physically in terms of materiality and texture. And Timo spoke about that earlier. And the third is meaning, which is about the emotional need that the color serves, whether in the past or in the present context. And so if we skip memory, then we have a superficial revival of a color. And if we ignore the material, then we distort the perception. And lastly, if we miss the meaning, it's very simple. We lose the strategic framework. But why is this important, you may ask? Why do we need to know the ancestry DNA of a color? It's very easy to explain. We now live in a time where color can be generated by algorithms. There are no limits to what AI can do. However, and I apologize in advance if the algorithms get offended here. So algorithms don't have the ability to feel the cultural memory. Yes, they are very good in detecting the patterns, but dare I ask, can they really interpret our emotional cycles? Our emotions are purely human. And although the machines are learning to imitate them, they are still empty of humanity. As color and CMF strategists, our role is not to chase the novelty from the algorithms, but to decode and translate the continuity, the directionality of the color and the materials, where they come from, where they're going. And this is something that at Color Marketing Group, we use and apply when we do color forecasting. Needless to say that the future is not built from randomness. It is built from layered memory. By now, I hope that you understand what I mean by the future is ancient. Colors we think are new in the market may not be so new after all. They are echoes of our cultural memories that reemerge when we are ready for them again. We can all agree that color carries history, but it also carries psychology and philosophy. And I go even one step further to say that it carries our neuropsychology, which are our feelings, our touch, our sounds, our flavors, our fragrances, and even much more and deeper than that. And so when we understand the notion that the future of color is ancient, CMF becomes less aesthetics and more strategy. And the real strategy comes from decoding the cultural memory, not from chasing short-lived trends. And to close, I would like to reiterate that when we dig into those layers of color archaeology, we stop designing for the moment and we start designing for resonance and for meaning. Because color archaeology provides the predictive depth of color DNA. It's not about what looks good, but why colors come back and how their meaning shifts. Material and finish tend to influence our emotions more powerfully when we understand the color's cultural lineage. And so, by understanding the deep cultural cycles, brands can avoid superficial retro looks that don't resonate emotionally and can tap into validated cultural continuities. And when we grasp this notion, CMF becomes less aesthetics and more strategy. The real strategy comes again from decoding our cultural memory, not from chasing the short-lived trends. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Montaha. I very much appreciate your presentation, and we look forward to hearing more about what you're doing and how the forecasting works in our panel discussion. So thanks again. And that brings us to our third speaker. And as our third and final talk is Color Without Consequences, Rethinking CMF Practice for a Regenerative Future. So it's a question, Color Without Consequences, and that's by Laura Perryman. Laura holds a Master of Arts from the Royal College of Art in London. She's a color and CMF designer, researcher, and forecaster with over 18 years of experience working across technology, interiors, materials, packaging, and product design. She's a founder of Color of Saying, a London-based CMF design research studio dedicated to purposeful, evidence-based color strategy, bridging material knowledge, both industrial and craft, color psychology, and sustainable practice for global brands and organizations. Laura is the author of The Color Bible, published in 2021, a definitive guide to color and art in design, and the creator of the Circular Color Report, 2021, Volume 2, 2025, and Ethical Color, 22, two publications and exhibitions that have shaped industry conversation around regenerative pigment systems, circular color strategies, and responsible CMF decision-making. She periodically lectures at the Royal College of Art and has worked with clients including Samsung, NCS Color, Fred Rigoni, Special Papers, Milliken, Cornex Paints, and Bloomberg. Without further ado, please welcome Laura Perryman. Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I feel very honored to be following two incredible practitioners, Timo, and also Montaha as well, really amazing presentations. And I hope that this obviously just adds that third dimension. I'm going to talk a little bit about Color Without Consequence, just so you know who I am. I'm Laura Perryman. I'm a colour material finish designer, and you can have my details that are on screen here. I have a book that's called The Colour Bible. It covers 100 colours in art and design. It's actually available in 8 languages now. I'm a very passionate colour designer and CMF practitioner. I really, really enjoy making processes and making colour. So this presentation really is going to be more about how my processes and my studio practice has changed in light of sustainable new dyes and inks and pigments that have come onto the scene, and why really as designers we have to take much more of a kind of ethical and responsible approach to when and where we choose colour and how we apply it. And so making colour has also been a very important part of my process and my practice over the years. And I love to find unique colour inspiration. This is a very kind of CMF way of working as well, searching for significant colours, found objects to find unique colour references, and then plotting this into cultural and lifestyle trends. So finding their relevance and their application within contexts such as product design or interiors, but creating this kind of tacit knowledge, and the knowledge of pigments and dyes has increased, I think, and it's something in my practice which is continuing all the time, understanding where things are coming from and who's made them. And so over the years, I have predicted and created very unique colors for all of these different kind of applications that you can see on screen here. Looking at how tones and colors shift across industries and working out where they resonate and how they can be applied, and thinking about surface finish and applications and materials, and bringing that down to a really kind of specific context, and looking at how we really design color in industry. And I've spent over 20 years doing that. And something really started to shift actually when I started to build a studio up. And this is my studio in London. It's a CMF design studio. We have a big material and colour library. It's a significant resource of over like 15 years of projects working in industry. It covers all sorts of different materials like biomaterials, colour made from lots of different sources, applications across industries. And we really strive to create much more kind of meaningful and deeper kind of colour forecasts and colour strategies for clients. And really this strategic approach for CMF is a really important part of our practice. And I think we might have heard other people mention CMF, certainly it's been mentioned in the previous presentations as well. But really CMF is the decisions that define how everyday objects feel. And sometimes I think it's great to start with a definition so we all understand what CMF can do in the current modern context before we can kind of start to challenge that a little bit. So colour is a great component. It's psychological and cultural language. This has already been touched upon already in the previous presentations. It drives first perception and emotional response for people, and brands obviously see it as a great recognition tool. So it's a great way of creating identities for products because it's the first thing that we see. It's the first thing that we latch onto in terms of product design. But materials are now starting to grow as a significant other dimension. The CMF dimension is a very physical thing. It determines everything from environmental impact to tactile experience now. That material choice is incredibly important. And also surface treatment, something that maybe finish was something that was maybe not so high on the ladder, but really it's about perception. And so that final coating layer between human touch and physical object is now as we grow into even more physical and digital environments, that physical interaction is now a really, really important consideration in product design. So kind of thinking about that and thinking about how the products and objects in our spaces resonate in the world around us. CMF design is very, very critical to designing for longevity, which is obviously the emphasis of the presentation that I'm going to give today. When we think about the consequences of materials and we think about the consequences of colours around us, sometimes we have a bit of a mismatch with how we're designing as colour designers, actually, because often as colour designers, we're putting a lot into the world around us. We're often creating new products, creating new colours, creating new materials, but actually there's a real deep need to move on the practice of colour design and the practice of CMF design, so that it really critically understands that actually when we give extensions to materials, when colours and materials come back into cycles to us, we can use colour as a really fundamental design tool to extend the life of many materials and products that we see today. And significantly moving forward in terms of colour practice, my practice has significantly shifted, I would say, over the last few years in terms of really thinking about how colour can be much more sustainable, push forward much more cycles of longevity, so away from fast fashion trends, but into sustainable cycles for companies where they can see a whole life cycle in terms of their colour and material portfolio going 20, 30 years in advance, not just 1 to 2 years. And so within this, we in the studio have created lots of different products and services. And so we create inspirational forecasts and do visual material storytelling. I have authored a series of insightful reports all around kind of ethical and sustainable colours. And we create this through material experiences and deliver this and disseminate this research in different ways, which I'm going to show you a little bit of some case studies. But colour without consequence is this important message that I want to get through in this presentation. I think lots of us don't really understand where colour comes from. So pigments and dyes, how they're manufactured, often are chemical. They are based on petrochemicals that derive from oil. We have some significant facts which we're working with. So 20% of industrial water pollution has come from the textile industry. We're looking at 800,000 tons of synthetic dyes annually produced globally. And lots of this is affecting our water streams, our health. It has massive implications. There is a massive case to shift from this. So over the past few years, and also within the Colour Bible book, I uncovered many new alternative natural dyes and waste colours that are coming through to complete almost an alternative spectrum of opportunity, which moves away some of these traditional pigments and dyes into some new opportunity areas. And this is actually a colour which is called beetroot. And I think this very much kind of goes back to some of the things that have been talked about in the previous presentations. Is there's a real history and an ancestry to colour. We have forgotten a lot of our colour past. Beetroot was a colour that was used over 150 years ago by women to bring blush into their skin and also to colour clothes, but it was discarded because it faded. And then all these synthetic dyes and colours came along, and that's why we have the colours that we have, because they're stable, they're very repeatable in the clothing that we wear today. However, there are lots of new types of colour that are coming onto the market, ones that are from waste colour sources. And within the Colour Bible book as well, I defined a new term for waste colour. This was something from a literacy point of view that was not available previously before, to understand how much we can garner from what we have around us. So it's just the byproducts from food waste or industrial waste or agricultural waste, plant-based waste, that are now giving us a new kind of format for colours, a new sense of colour literacy, I suppose. So what if all the resources we already had were already in existence? Instead of just taking and creating new all the time, what would happen if that influenced our colour practice? And a question that I ask myself a lot, and I'm still coming to the conclusion of, really, is how do we develop a regenerative approach to designing colour? So how do we take away this mass manufactured cycle of always wanting to create more and more and more, but how can we look at much more of a kind of give back approach, a much more healthy approach to creating colours and materials in the world around us? And so I've just got a series of points, really, things that I've learned along my journey of creating alternative colours and alongside working with industry, is this idea of literacy. So really understanding where colour comes from and redefining what the potential that is in these alternative forms of colour. So Circular Colour Report is a resource that we created in the studio. We developed a series of ways of defining new forms of colour that have been brought back, that have less impact on our environment and our health. So this is these are colours that are derived from waste or organic sources, and they're part of a circular economy. Also, organic sources decay naturally within natural cycles, so they have much more benefit to us. Part of this report also highlighted that there are many types and streams of alternative colours now. So we're not just talking about plant-based colours or botanical colours, but we can get colour from recycled materials as well, such as plastics, glass. Many types of materials that are given a second life will be abundant in terms of hues and tones, but they will be very different from what we're used to. So not necessarily fixed colours, but actually colours that have a history to them, which is very exciting and interesting. Also colours that have maybe been forgotten, their ancestry, such as the fungi world and interesting mushrooms creating colour that have always been like that, actually, but now they're coming back as maybe even a force that could be used even in manufacture. And so there are many forms of different spectrums of colours that can be brought out. And certainly within our reports, we've tried to highlight some of the benefits of these colours in the world around us. So accepting new aesthetic directions, such as imperfect colours or ones that have flecks, marks of use, time embedded in them. We're not looking at flat, consistent colour anymore. We're looking at a colour that's come from an organic source. Also, the sort of the validness of actually creating colours from places, so rocks, minerals, plants that have a place-based approach to them. This is a very fundamental strategy now that can be used in order to create a palette, and that's something that we've been working with in the studio, certainly. And just to kind of get underneath this a little bit, it's quite deep and you might want to return to it, but this point about systems thinking is a really, really key point to the feature of some of these alternative sources. And that's thinking about everything to do with the origin of that material and that colour. So this was a particular piece from Ethical Colour Report, which is one of the pieces of research that we've done, is looking at deriving colours from seaweed, from the natural biosource that is on our beaches around our world. It's often discarded. We're not talking about cutting seaweed away from the biosource. We're talking about the seaweed that washes up on our beaches. It's an abundant source. But where has it come from? What's its material origin? And what's its life cycle? So what happens when we process this material? We could extract colour from it, but what other sources of material form this cycle? And so through some of the resources, we've looked at trying to present this in a more systematic way, creating tools really for designers, for strategists to think about what if colour was harvested regeneratively from the oceans? What would a circular model look like? How could we understand many of the circular needs of that colour? So its origin, its end of life, its in-use state, and how can we use that as a design tool? I'm very passionate about this. I think it's an important part of colour literacy. And part of this project that was originally concepted in 2022 was looking at how do we create a palette now? So how do we look at creating a full spectrum of alternative sources? We're looking at many waste sources here, from the denim waste industry, from mushrooms, from berries, from foraged materials, all the way through to much more kind of technical colours, such as biological bacteria-based colours, to prove that there is the possibility to make an alternative spectrum. But part of this discovery process and this part of this ability as designers and colour designers to think about, the next generation of colour design and colour literacy is this ability to discover these things as well. So part of the work that I've been doing over the past few years is to build up ways that we can discover these colours through exhibitions, through insights, through also community-based workshops, bringing alternative pigments to the hands of designers and getting everybody and public and people like really getting under the skin of what some of these things are made from. So pigments and dye, live workshops, asking these questions, fundamentally finding out how we can make them on the kitchen table, and using that as a form of research, but also as a form of new literacy when we're talking about design. And so when we come to think about a regenerative palette, which I want to continue to work on, because I can't say that this work is complete, but I think building up a regenerative approach to colour and to design is thinking about all the time the implications, the social, ecological and design awareness implications of these colours. And these colours that we can see on screen have been gathered at a very specific place in London at a flower farm. They were gathered within the living systems, within the cycle of growth of these plants. And we were able to observe them in a workshop that I ran. We looked very closely at the petal patinas, how the plants were changing, responding to light, what soil they were grown in. And this all influenced how we were able to kind of harness the colour from these plants and create a palette. Also, there's a whole new spectrum of colour that can be harnessed through even just pH changes. So the balance of like alkaline or acid within the natural colours themselves. This can create a much more regenerative or generative kind of approach to colour. So again, we can put these colors into new cycles. We can reuse them again. They can be used and they can be composted, so they don't actually affect us or have harm. And we can look at how they might become a form of regenerative learning for us when we create palettes. So using natural color can be a learning curve, and it can also be a learning reserve. And so this is kind of my last image, really, just to share with you, is this sense of regenerative color and this sense of understanding where all color, living color, can come from as well. And that it's a sense of collaboration as well when we make color. And we think about creating color for applications, and we think about creating color for context now, is that it's a sense of collaboration. We have to think about the origin, the footprint, what things are made from, but also the implications when it hits a context, when it comes into value. What's that final impact going to be, and then where is it going to go afterwards? And this is a cycle now, and it's a new form of cycle, and it's a new approach to color that takes us on a completely different journey. And so these colors are not fixed necessarily in their formal sense, in the way that we would have previously thought about a yellow is just a yellow. We're looking at shifting nature of time, material. We're also looking at pH changes, and then things that are designed to fade as well. So giving us a whole new raft of circular and ethical and more responsible aesthetics within color design. And if anybody else would like to learn about these reports or would like to follow us as we continue this journey to regenerate and create more regenerative color practices, you are welcome to, and my details are on screen. So I hope that you found that informative, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Laura, thank you so much. Music to, I think, my ears, and I'm from the chat box, many people's ears. A regenerative approach to color and design is just absolutely good for our soul and absolutely important. So thank you very much to Laura, to Timo, to Montaha for your thought-provoking and inspiring presentations, which leads us to our second part. This is our panel discussion, and that is our 30-minute. We have until 12:30 Eastern Time. Our moderator for the panel is Ingrid Calvo-Ivanovic, color designer, researcher, and consultant, co-chair of the AIC Study Group for Color Education, and member of the Color Literacy Project core team. Ingrid will be joined by Timo, Montaha, and Laura, and I will monitor your questions from the chat box. But we look forward to hearing from you and look forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you, Luann. Thank you very much to all our speakers for these very compelling presentations, which together I think offer this comprehensive view of what we are trying to see and define as contemporary color practice. I see we have a lot of questions from the chat. I don't want to take a lot of time by posing my questions, but I would like to start with something that Laura was also addressing in her presentation, and that's very related also to what we want to do with this new series, this forum series for this year. So as you know, the framework in which we are organizing these forums is color literacy, and Laura, you were also also discussing about a little bit about color literacy. So my first question, also cross speaker question for all the three of you, is if you can express a little bit more about what does it mean, color literacy, or what will you define color literacy in your specific practices? Some of you said something about it, but I would like you to go a little bit deeper on what it means to be literate in color today in your specific practice fields.
I can go if you want, because I've just been carried on talking. It might help. I think for me is that 360 understanding of color. So what colour is from a material, a dye point of view, its material origin. I think we've become very fixated on kind of trend colours. We don't understand where they've come from. You know, we've touched upon that in different ways. I think that the more that we understand what something is made from, the more that we will understand where its future progression can go. And I'm talking about that from a kind of life cycle point of view as well. And I think that we have forgotten where things are connected to as well. So this is also to do with where colours have come from. We can reconnect with that, I think, quite quickly. By looking and observing and being a lot more literate in terms of our seeing and knowing of colour. And that can be very, very like within our own environments, within our own regions, within our own local demographic as well. So in terms of what I think literacy can be, I think it's about that knowledge, that local knowledge and that material knowledge, and building that up, and being hands-on with colour as much as possible is also really a literate element.
Thank you. Laura?
I can go next.
Yeah.
Okay, to me, in addition to what Laura said, of course, the literacy of color is more understanding what color is. Color is not really trend. I mean, in the last 10 years, people think that color is all about trends. Trends is what we are doing in marketing to promote colors and to put colors up front for whatever reason. But color is much deeper than that. And I think Timo said that at the beginning, and I quote Carl from NCS, who usually says, at the beginning, there was light. And then after light, there were colors. Because if without light, there is no color. And without people, there are no colors. And without objects, there are no colors. And I'm taking this from Timo's presentation. So my understanding of literacy is I would like people to understand what color is, how we perceive the color, what is the terminology that we use to describe a color. It is not about if I like it or dislike it. It's about what it is. What is the DNA of this color? How it's created. If I say a color is orange, what are the pigments that make a color look orange? For instance, some people say, oh, this is a green that has red influences. But sometimes that green, it's perceived red to this specific person, but in its DNA does not have any red. And so it is those nuances. It's just like you learn the alphabet. Color literacy is learning the alphabet of color. Very simple.
Very interesting. Timo, you want to add up for that?
Yes, thank you. We heard a lot already that I would say is really important for color literacy. And you said maybe that we learn some kind of alphabet. I think actually it's a little bit more complicated. I compare this sometimes with music, for example. It's like when we learn about color in school, in architecture school, and all these other institutions. We learn the color wheel. We learn about color contrasts and all these things. That's a little bit like learning about different tones in music. But what makes color work is, as I already said, is the constellation, or is the whole song maybe that occurs from different tones. So it's not about actually the alphabet, but it's about the the poetic moment. So the poem actually that performs when you have different nuances and tones and spaces and materials, and you create them to have a constellation that has an atmospheric moment we as humans perceive in this or that way. So, and I think if you do this careful, and this is something that maybe has to change, that we have to think more careful, more slowly. And this is also a crucial point at the moment, that it's becoming more and more fast, actually. So industry is becoming faster and faster, but we have to be more careful. We have to be more slow to make color understandable and to make color concepts that last. So it's a contradiction somehow that we experience. And I think color literacy is a way to maybe connect, to let all the people connect to color, to the world around us, and in relation, as I said before. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm very interested also in this concept that we have been hearing from you, the three of you, of mainly in the times that we are living, this AI eruption in our lives, and how it may shift and change our practices. But I would like to give the word to Luan, and maybe then if we have the time, we can come back to that. So Luan, do we have any questions from the chat box you want to share with us?
Yes. Well, I first want to read a comment that I think is really relevant, and then follow that by a question that's related to what you just said, Timo. So the comment is from Anna Resende, and she says, I believe that all of us who research, teach, and discuss color with our students felt truly supported by the words and reflections shared by the speakers. They resonate deeply with this emerging need for a more contemporary and complex way of understanding and engaging with color in its many worlds. My thanks to the organizers and especially to the speakers. Amazing Brazilian hugs. That's from Anna. And I'm going to follow that by a question from Angie. And she says, in a hyper-globalized world where cultures are constantly adopted and reinterpreted into something more personal, what approach would you suggest to meaningfully reconnect people with their color DNA? And I think that she wrote it for Montaha, but I think that was before Laura's presentation, but I feel like in a way that is addressed to everyone.
If I may go first, because I think it was right after my presentation. In my opinion, reconnecting with the color DNA is not about going back. It's about actually becoming aware of the color. And so, for instance, moving from consumption or trend consumption or color consumption to more to self-observation. So instead of again saying what's trending, maybe we should ask what feels familiar and comforting and what is instinctive to us now, or reconnecting with the context of the color itself. Because as we all know, color does not exist in isolation. So it's connected to climate, to light, to food, to craft, to local environments, whatever. Everything that is around us is influencing how we are perceiving that color. And so when we understand where the color is coming from, it becomes more meaningful and less consumable, if you want. And so the idea is not to replicate exactly the color how it was in the past or how it looks in the market, but the goal also is not to recreate the past, but it's to translate it. It's how does this past look today? How is it influencing nowadays, and how is it going to influence the future, rather than just taking it as is and consider it as abstract, or that's it and I'm not going to change it because that's how it was before.
Yeah, maybe I can continue, because I think it's maybe not worth looking for our DNA, but so maybe look for the relations we want to create, actually. So you have to look forward. And I don't think it's necessary to look back, actually, or to search something that is not existing, because it's all a cultural aspect and cultural changes. And at first, maybe we have to ask, what is a hyper globalized world, actually? I don't really know what it is, and what is the influence on us in a hyper-globalized world. Maybe the influence is that it's becoming less specific, that colors are becoming less specific, that they're becoming less personal, that they're becoming more technocratic, they are becoming less influential, and they have less, how do I say, they lose, actually. Color loses if you put them on a global scale. If you say a color will be worthy if you find it on the streets, on a painting in a specific area, if you find it in a specific landscape and you connect the color with this. So you obviously have to go to some kind of place, to something that can resonate, actually. I heard you all talking about resonance a lot. So it's really difficult for us as human beings to resonate with a hyper-globalized world, of course, because this is really huge. But it's much more easy to resonate with your neighbor, with the streets you're living in, with the town you're living in, with the landscape you're living in. And of course, you take aspects of the whole world inside of this, as maybe this color from there, this color from there, and interesting narrations you combine. This then becomes playful and interesting, and maybe also future orientated. Yeah. Thank you.
Laura, I will add to what Timo was saying. In this resonating effect of colors, or looking for that resonance in colors in our life, when you were talking about these recycled color, the recycled materials, do you think this layer also of meaning that colors, recycled colors, carry with them could be a way for us to also connect more or reconnect more with these local identities, or this very specificity that Timo said that colors were losing? What can you say about that that stories that color carry with them?
I think, some of these recycled colors obviously have lives before them, and we're now starting to use waste is now, or different forms of waste are starting to become really important material and color sources. So we are learning as we go along, but I think we are all still starting to learn more deeply about ourselves and where we want to position ourselves, ethically and responsibility wise. And so these colors can give us a guide, really. We can go along with them, which is kind of some of the points that I was trying to say in the presentation, is that we can become collaborators within their spectrum as well. So as we process waste color, it changes, and it will inevitably never be the same as it was once before. Time ages things, fading light and the effects of UV do affect colors as well. But also the wear and tear and the longevity of colors is something that's going to become a very prevalent conversation, I think, within literacy. But we can find, I think, these delicate nuances that maybe live in between these cycles, where we can find an emotional and a human quality that makes sense to us and that we can influence and be part of. For instance, that's some of the things that we could do by just being on the kitchen table, making inks, or getting our hands on raw materials and experimenting with very local based, plant-based color. We can start seeing the nuances that appear that we may have never observed before, because we've always had very fixed color. And this is introspective work as well. I think it's going back to some of the original comments on this question as well, is what makes sense to us now in our futures, what can we personally resonate with, what do we need, and how does that match with our activities and needs and our emotional kind of desires. I suppose I think from a consumer level that's super interesting, but I think there's also other levels which are to do with like commercial spaces, public environments, which are not about necessarily like an individual preference. They're about a collective preference. It's about a region, a place, a country. And I think that's where this sense of collaboration really needs to come into play. So more of these adaptive practices where we collaborate to create color, or we're collaborating with others to make colors. I think this is also a way forward for this kind of question to be resolved.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting also because this collaborative practice is not something that we have seen very much in the past centuries, right? In terms of color theory. Color theories are usually one author theory, right? So one author's knowledge that is shared and disseminated. So I think this is also very aligned what we are trying to do with this color literacy project. Thank you. Lu, do we have any other questions we want to share from the audience?
Yes. Well, I think just here's a one that's it's by Angel, Lucia Chaparro Gutierrez, and it's related to what you were just talking about, Laura, and actually this past question. She asks, in archaeology practice, how do you approach the selection of colors to reinforce the cultural and territorial identity of a place? And I think just in taking that question, the idea of like, even beyond that kind of practice for our own practices, whatever you're doing, this concept of how do you approach the selection of color to reinforce the cultural and territorial identity of a place?
I guess it depends on what resources you can get access to in some ways, but I think always looking at, what resonates really highly within the spaces and the environments, whether this is buildings, whether this is the soil, whether this is the tangible, tactile materiality of this cultural reference point, I would say. I have had the experience of working with archives as well. I think they're extremely valuable resources to start to draw color, I suppose, color areas or territory areas from. Specifically, when we look at like earth colors or kind of these starting points, we can see like rich territories of orange, reds, terracottas and things like that. And there will be things that are very, very, very specific to regions and places, villages, countries, everywhere. There will be these kind of very specific points, but I think it's important to map out the choices of color territory and also the nuances in between, and not be scared to see a very big spectrum of color initially. But then we have to strip down to a very kind of like resonant and relative choice, which is kind of going back to what Timo is saying as well, is a sense of relation. So what is the relation of the color to the application and the context? Because we can research cultural colors, create fabulously long and very literate palettes, but actually what is the best use of color considering the context, the light, the application, the materiality? There's a need to have, two layers of like consultation or decision making within that, but that's just my personal initial response. So maybe there's some other responses as well.
Montaha, Timo?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the easiest response is of course go for a stroll. Yeah. Just there is some French guys, Lacador Vassal, if you know them, architecture guys, who say, okay, they start a project with phase 0, and phase 0 is to just be there at one place for 1 week and just look. So just be there and feel what's coming towards you. write down feelings you have, smells you feel, things you hear, things you touch. So be there at this place and make up your mind about it. So, and this is, I think, this phase 0 is something that normally doesn't happen in most cases of projects. And I think this is the initial phase, the most important phase, where you really get a feeling for a project, where you really can make up your mind about things, where you see what people are coming by, where you see who's not there. And maybe you come, as Lakato Vassal, you come to the conclusion that, okay, the place is perfect, you don't have to do anything. This can also happen. But I think this is something, just involve yourself, I think. There is no prefab solution, actually. You can ask AI, of course, and it will have answers. But you have to be there yourself, I think. So you have to smell, you have to touch, you have to get dirty yourself, and then put this into a positive project, of course. And there are resources, of course. Use them and be there, live. This is maybe a solution that creates something that is growing. Yeah.
Thank you, Timo. I think we are almost there, arriving to the end of our forum. But as we may have a great number of people coming from a student audience today, I would like you to, if you can, share a brief suggestion for someone that is starting in this field of color practice. So, Timo, you were already saying this thing of going back to observation, this embodied practice of observing and being there. So, if Montaha or Laura, you want to share something, a brief phrase or comment on a suggestion, how do we start in color practice from your point of view, very briefly?
I think the most brief answer I could say, it's included in your question. You said color practice, and that is the best way for learning color is to practice the I don't want to call it the industry of color, but it's to practice color, it's to look around you. Color is everywhere. So try to understand the color layers, try to interpret why this color is looking that way. Watch a tree throughout the day and see how it's changing color. That's the first practice. Very easy, doesn't cost any money. You can see it throughout the day how it's changing and ask. Maybe if you don't have anyone to ask, but you can ask a professor, ask a colleague, get in touch with people that know more than you do, and just don't follow the people that make mistakes. Just follow the people that are credible, that give you credible learning, because there's a lot of things out there that aren't necessarily credible.
Thank you, Montaha. Laura, you want to share a brief suggestion?
I think it's echoing the same sort of points, really, is just to get your hands on colour. So in its very many forms, whether this is a piece of bark, whether it's a paint tube, whether it's, I don't know, found objects, things that you've collected, things that emotionally resonate with you, go on walks. Timo's already said that. It's a very kind of common practice to gather that first response to colour, because often instinct is a really important part of colour, and relearning the instincts of colour, I think, is a very important part of working alongside colour. So when we're developing a practice, we're working alongside many forms, material forms of colour. And if we can start to understand that colour is not just flat, it's textured, has form, has shape, it's in plastics, it's in metals, it's in glass, it's in leaves, forms, things that are around us in our day-to-day nature environment and in our industrial environments, we can start to see that colour is a material lens within our lives, and actually it makes up the fabric of almost everything every day. And just having that observation creating that resource for ourselves. It doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to be about getting all of the amazing expensive pigments from here, there, and everywhere. Actually, we can boil onion skins and we can create color from waste that's being discarded and we'd never use. I think experimentation and observation and building your own library of color is something that has always grounded my practice, and helped me build up a practice as well. So if we're talking about color practices, then I would say that's a positive way of moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Timo, something to add?
No, actually. I think we already said enough to get started, and that's the point. I think what I experience with first grade students, actually they are already color experts, but they don't know. and this is something, as Laura said, you have to reflect on yourself, on others, how they use color, and to practice color, as Montaha said, to get more knowledge about it and to be able to apply it in a way that benefits people, yeah, and relations.
Thank you very much to all of you, and I will leave the stage to Luan to wrap up and close our session.
Thank you so much. Please, everyone, join me in thanking our speakers for this program. You're welcome to turn on your camera to show your appreciation. Thank you so much to everyone, to Timo, Montaha, Laura, for sharing your research with us today, and Ingrid for moderating the discussion, and also to everyone who's here for being part of our forum. Before we adjourn, I'd like to invite you to keep an eye out for our next forum in our series, which will take place later this spring. The date's not available yet, but details will be posted on the Color Literacy Project website as soon as the information is confirmed, so stay tuned. In the meantime, we encourage you to visit the website to learn about 21st century color literacy. Check out the resources, including fundamental exercises and concepts, and the recordings to all of our previous forums. They're also then posted on our YouTube channel. One more announcement, hot off the presses. The Inter-Society Color Council has just announced an exciting online opportunity. It's Summer Symposium 2026, Defining Color, with Corey Stamper as a keynote speaker. Corey's new book, True Color, has just been published. I have a copy on my desk that I cannot wait to read, starting this weekend. So the information will also be posted very soon on the ISCC website. With that said, again, thank you to our color community, to everyone. Please have a colorful spring, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.